The courtroom is where truth and justice reign. But what happens when prejudice blinds the very people meant to uphold the law? For Amara Daniels, every step she had taken in her career was a battle. From law school, where she was doubted, to courtrooms where she was underestimated, she had fought to prove that brilliance had no skin color, no gender, no limits. And now, she had risen higher than most ever dreamed. She was the youngest attorney general in the state's history. But on this day, as she entered a crowded courtroom for a high-profile hearing, none of that mattered. Because to one man, the judge presiding over the case, Amara was just another black lawyer. The courtroom buzzed with chatter as Amara adjusted her files, preparing her arguments. She was sharp, calm, focused. But before she could even introduce herself, the judge's gavel slammed. "Counselor," Judge Whitmore barked, peering down from his bench with thinly veiled disdain. "This is a serious courtroom. We don't have time for theatrics. Why don't you let one of the senior attorneys handle this?" The words hung in the air like poison. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The opposing counsel smirked, sensing weakness. Amara raised her head slowly. Her voice was calm, but every syllable carried fire. "Your Honor, I am the attorney for this case, and I am fully prepared to proceed." But Whitmore waved her off dismissively. "Ms. Daniels, this isn't a debate club. This case involves powerful corporations, millions of dollars. This court deserves someone with credibility." Gasps spread across the room. The gallery stiffened. Everyone could see what this was, not a question of her ability, but of her identity. Amara felt the sting, but she refused to flinch. She had endured worse. She had been told her whole life that she didn't belong. But this moment was different, because today, the world was watching. The judge leaned back smugly. "Unless you want to waste more of our time, I suggest you step aside." Silence gripped the room. The opposing lawyer, a wealthy white man in an expensive suit, smirked. "Perhaps Your Honor is right. Maybe Ms. Daniels is a bit out of her depth." That was the spark. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered in protest, others shook their heads. But Amara didn't move. She adjusted her jacket, placed her hands firmly on the table, and locked eyes with Judge Whitmore. "With respect, Your Honor," she said evenly, "this court is not a stage for prejudice. It is a chamber of justice. And if you insist on questioning my authority to stand here..." She reached into her briefcase, pulling out a leather folder embossed with the state seal. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as she held it up. "Then perhaps you should be reminded of who I am." The judge frowned, annoyed. "And who might that be?" Amara flipped open the folder, her voice ringing with power. "I am Amara Daniels, Attorney General of this state. And not only am I qualified to try this case, I am the chief legal officer of every courtroom in this jurisdiction, including yours." The room erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Phones snapped pictures. The opposing counsel's smirk evaporated, replaced with shock. But the most dramatic reaction came from Judge Whitmore himself. His face drained of color, his gavel slipping slightly in his hand. He stammered, "Attorney General? That's impossible. You don't look the part?" Amara cut in sharply. "That's the problem, Your Honor. You see my skin before my title, my gender before my achievements. But the law does not bow to bias, and neither will I." The gallery erupted in applause. Some stood to their feet, clapping. Others shouted, "That's right!" The judge's arrogance crumbled. His attempt to dismiss her had backfired spectacularly, and now the entire courtroom was watching him squirm. Amara stepped closer, her presence commanding. "You tried to silence me, but you've only given me a louder voice. And today, that voice will speak not just for me, but for every person who's ever been told they don't belong." The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Whitmore lowered his gaze, humiliated, his authority stripped bare by the very woman he tried to undermine. Amara turned to the gallery, her voice steady. "Let the record show justice does not cower, justice does not discriminate, and justice will not be dismissed." The trial proceeded, but the power dynamic had shifted entirely. The opposing counsel, once arrogant, now fumbled nervously with his papers. Every word Amara spoke carried weight. Every objection she made was sustained. The judge, still reeling from his embarrassment, dared not challenge her again, And when she delivered her closing argument, sharp, impassioned, undeniable, the jury's eyes glistened with conviction. By the end of the hearing, victory wasn't just written in the verdict. It was written in the stunned silence of her opponents, in the humbled expression of the judge, and in the thunderous applause that followed. Amara Daniels had not only won the case, she had won back her dignity, her respect, and the undeniable truth that power built on prejudice always crumbles. But just as she gathered her files, ready to leave the courtroom in triumph, her phone buzzed. A new message flashed across the screen. "Impressive performance, Attorney General. But don't get too comfortable. Some of us don't play by the law, and we're coming for you." Amara froze, her breath catching. She glanced around the courtroom. Reporters swarmed, supporters applauded, but somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching. This wasn't just about one judge. This was bigger, more dangerous. And Amara Daniels was about to face the greatest battle of her career. Before we dive back into this explosive story, if you're really enjoying it, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you never miss my latest uploads. Now let's continue, because things are about to get even more intense. The courtroom was still buzzing from the shock of Amara Daniels' revelation. The once dismissive Judge Whitmore now sat stiffly, his eyes avoiding hers, while the opposing counsel looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Amara had just proven herself not only as the lead attorney on the case, but as the Attorney General of the state, a truth that had stripped the mask of prejudice from everyone who doubted her. But Amara's triumph was short-lived. As she collected her files, her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message appeared. "Your victory today made enemies powerful ones. Be careful, this is bigger than you think." Amara's chest tightened. Who was sending these messages? And why did they sound like a warning rather than a threat? Still, she straightened her jacket and walked out of the courtroom with her head high. The press swarmed her with questions. Supporters cheered. Cameras flashed. To the world, she looked untouchable. But inside, Amara felt a storm brewing. That evening, Amara returned to her office, reviewing the day's victory. The corporation she had been prosecuting was powerful, wealthy, and deeply connected. She knew they wouldn't take their loss quietly. Suddenly, her assistant, Jordan, rushed in, pale as a ghost. "Ma'am, you need to see this." He switched on the TV. A news anchor was speaking urgently. "Breaking news. Documents have surfaced claiming Attorney General Amara Daniels has ties to corrupt dealings during her time as a private attorney. The documents, leaked anonymously, suggest she accepted bribes in exchange for favorable settlements." Amara's stomach dropped. It was a lie, a fabrication, but it was spreading like wildfire. Jordan clenched his fists. "They're trying to destroy you. The timing. It's no coincidence. They're coming after you because you embarrassed the judge and humiliated those corporate lawyers." Amara exhaled slowly. "And if I don't fight back, this lie will become the truth." The next morning, Amara walked into the Supreme Court chambers for a special hearing. Reporters swarmed the steps, shouting accusations. Inside, she faced a panel of judges, one of them being Judge Whitmore, the very man who had dismissed her the day before. His expression was smug, as if fate had given him a second chance to bury her. "Attorney General Daniels," one judge said coldly, "these allegations are serious. If true, they could mean disbarment or worse. How do you plead?" Amara stood tall, her eyes burning with resolve. "I plead innocent, and I will prove that these documents are forged, planted by those who fear justice." Whitmore leaned forward, his voice dripping with false pity. "Or perhaps, Ms. Daniels, you've risen too fast, too soon. Maybe you don't belong here after all." The irony wasn't lost on Amara or anyone in the chamber. Yesterday, he tried to dismiss her for being unqualified. Today, he sought to destroy her with lies. But Amara wasn't the same woman she had been yesterday. Now she knew her strength. And she wasn't fighting just for herself. She was fighting for every person who had ever been silenced by prejudice and corruption. She laid out her evidence, time-stamped records, financial audits, testimony from colleagues, all proving her innocence. Piece by piece, she dismantled the accusations. The courtroom grew tense, the power dynamic shifting once again. Finally, she held up the forged documents. "These were manufactured by the very corporation I defeated yesterday. They knew they couldn't beat me in the courtroom, so they tried to destroy me outside of it. But truth doesn't bow to lies. The judges whispered among themselves. Whitmore's smug expression faltered. Then came the twist. Jordan burst through the doors, breathless, holding a USB drive. "We have proof," he shouted. The chief judge allowed him to present it. On the screen, a video played. Secret footage of the corporation's executives plotting with private investigators to fabricate the evidence against Amara. Their voices were clear, their intent undeniable. Gasps filled the chamber. Reporters scribbled furiously. The lie had just collapsed in spectacular fashion. Whitmore's face turned pale. He had clearly aligned himself with the corporation, hoping to watch Amara fall. Now, the entire court could see his bias for what it was. The chief judge banged the gavel. "These allegations are baseless. Attorney General Daniels is cleared of all wrongdoing. Furthermore, this court will open an inquiry into the corporation and into Judge Whitmore's conduct." The gallery erupted in applause. Justice had not just been served, it had struck like lightning. Whitmore slumped back in his chair, humiliated and defeated. The very arrogance he had used to dismiss Amara had come back to crush him. Amara turned to the gallery, her voice steady, her words carrying like thunder. "This is what happens when prejudice tries to silence truth. This is what happens when corruption tries to bury justice. They may come for me again, but I will not back down. Because justice belongs to the people, and the people will not be dismissed." The crowd roared. Cameras flashed. The world had witnessed not just a courtroom drama, but a triumph of resilience over corruption. Amara Daniels walked out of the court that day stronger than ever. But as she stepped into the sunlight, her phone buzzed again. "Impressive, but you've only exposed the pawns. The real players are still waiting, and they don't lose." Her eyes narrowed. This was far from over. She had won the battle, but a war was brewing, and next time the enemy would strike harder, deeper, and closer to home. Life lesson. Truth will always outlast lies, and courage will always outshine prejudice. The higher you rise, the stronger the opposition may come. But integrity is the shield that no weapon of corruption can pierce. Now let me ask you, if you were Amara, would you keep fighting these battles in the open, knowing the risks, or would you step back for your safety? Comment your answer below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button for more powerful stories like this one.